He hails from Lily of the Valley corner between East Street and Market Street in Over the Hill, New Providence, Bahamas. He was the second of 3 children. His mother was a teacher and his dad a dynamite expert. He was a focused, straight-A student, an athlete who played basketball. He acted, he danced, and he was so good at English that he considered being an English professor. He finally decided on a career in social welfare and eventually became a renowned attorney at law. Affectionately known as Pro, on today's episode of Bahamian Heritage Series, Dr. Godfrey Wallace Pinder, Esquire.
My full name is Godfrey Wallace Pinder. Date of birth is the 20th of February, 1939. I was born through Lily of the Valley corner. I was born at home. My father's name was Joseph Pinder, and my mother's name was Gladys Wallace Pinder. My father's from Andros. He was born in Manawa Sound. My mother is from Rumkey originally, and not originally, but her mother and her father were from Rumkey and Ragged Island respectively, but she was born at home as well.
Okay.
The Valley corner.
What about your grandparents? Did you know them?
I knew my grandmother on my mother's side. Her name was Mary Wallace. My grandmother on my father's side, I found out later, was Augustine Bethel from James Siston.
Okay.
And my grandfather on my mother's side was James Wallace, and my grandfather on my father's side was Jonathan Pinder.
Interesting. So your grandparents on your mother's side was from where? Same place that she was from?
My grandfather on my mother's side, he was from Ragged Island.
Okay. And your grandparents on your father's side were from?
Andros.
Andros. So they all came from Andros. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Do you remember much about Lily of the Valley corner growing up?
I remember a lot about that.
Okay. Do you remember the house that you lived in, and is it still there?
Yes, I remember the house I lived in. It was, first of all, it was in the middle of the corner. And if you come from East Street, you come from near the Valley corner. If you come from Market Street, you come from Farm Road.
Right.
And Red Lion Bar Corner was the name of it when you come from that end, because there was a Red Lion Bar on the corner. In other words, there was a bar with a red lion painted on it.
Okay.
And I lived in the middle of the corner in a 2-room greenhouse that was on the eastern side of the lot.
Okay.
Now we had a lot, 100 by 100, that was owned by my grandmother.
Okay.
My grandfather, James Wallace, had died by the time I was born.
Do you know if that house still exists?
It does.
Oh, wow. Is somebody living in it?
I don't know if anyone is living in it. I think they store things in it, but it's still strong. My grandmother, Mary Wallace, turned the house over to me, and I eventually turned it over to my sister.
Okay.
Because I went abroad to school, and she needed a place, so I let her have that.
Okay. So you had a sister. You had any other siblings?
Yeah, I had a sister called Marina Del Pinder. She married an Ingram, Carlos Ingram, and I had a brother. He was named after my father, Joseph Pinder. So he was a junior, I suppose.
Okay, so there were what, 3 of you?
Three. I was in the middle.
Okay, all right.
My brother was first, then me, then my sister.
What was Nassau like in your growing up days?
Well, you mean New Providence?
Yes.
Because Nassau is in Bay Street.
True.
Yeah, so New Providence was...
Like, especially in that area where you live.
It was family-like. Everybody looked after each other, and they said good morning and good evening. If anybody got into trouble, the group would, gather around him and help him out. If a man was drunk in the area, if he was lying on the ground and his money was pouring out of his pocket, someone would put the money back in his pocket, found out where he lived, and took him home.
Wow. Well, where did you go to school?
I went to St. Augustine's eventually. high school at St. Augustine's. Well, it was college, really. They called it St. Augustine's College. But before that, it was Our Lady's through the Bow Street. I was baptized a Roman Catholic.
Okay.
So Our Lady's was Roman Catholic. St. Augustine's was Roman Catholic, but it was 6 years.
So who were some of the friends that you had back in those days? Like, can you name some people that you could still remember?
Yes, I can name people who were in my class. I started out with 24 people in my class. One of them was James Nixon. He's passed. He is the stepfather of the lady who is here. Her name is Paulus Lockhart. Paulus Hannah Lockhart. She's Hannah.
Okay.
And then there was John Gordon, the pilot. He became a pilot. Then there was Patrick Humes. I don't know what he did afterwards. There was a white fellow there. He was, I don't know if he was English or Belgium, but his last name was Sharam or something of that nature. And of course, there was another person there called Charlie Edgecombe from Fox Hill.
That name sounds familiar.
Yeah, and then there were several others. There was Blaze Taylor.
Right.
He was from up on the hill, you know, Meeting Street area.
Right.
And an assortment of other persons were there.
Okay, so you said you were Catholic. Which church did you attend?
Our Ladies,
Okay.
where I started out kindergarten, and Our Ladies is of course through the Bow Street,
Right.
and Young Street is on the southern side.
What type of work did your parents do?
My mother was a teacher.
Okay.
She taught at Our Ladies, and I was very close to her, and she more or less held me close to her because I guess she saw I learned a little more easily than the other two. And so she taught me at home originally before I went to kindergarten. My father was a dynamite expert,
Wow, interesting.
and he put down all the windmills in Prospect Ridge in the early days.
Okay. Very interesting. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So when did you finish high school? How old were you? You remember? And the date?
Yeah, well, it was June of 1957, and I was 18.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then what? What happened after that?
Well, I was first in my class, so I had A's in everything, Latin, English,
Wow.
English grammar, mathematics, everything. But I was a good basketball player. So somebody from California saw me play basketball and wanted me to be a basketball player at the University of San Francisco.
Okay.
So I was recruited to play basketball there, but not until I showed them my grades. So when the pastor, Father Pryor, showed them my grades, they sent a postcard. They say, "Come now."
Oh.
And I went before school opened, and the coach, Phil Wolpert was his name, said to me, "Now you have straight A's." I said, "Yes." He said, "That is rare in basketball." Say, basketball players strive to get a C. He says, "So I want you to help the basketball players get a C." So that was my task.
Yeah.
And I was very popular on the campus because I sang like Harry Belafonte. I danced, I acted, and of course I was popular because of my accent. And they taught me to be different to the extent that they thought I was white. Well, they said I was white because on the custom card they had first of all they had from the bottom they had other, then they had Hispanic, then they had Afro-American, then they had Caucasian. So they start from the bottom. They said, "But you're not other because of your language, you know, the way you spoke. You're not Hispanic." I say, "No, I'm not." He said, "You're not Afro-American." I say, "No." "So you must be white." So there's only one left.
Wow.
And I won a part in the play called Brigadoon. I won the head role. But he was white because they were from Scotland. And of course they had to paint me white, and it took 7 hours every time before I went on stage for them to paint me, and they painted my face, my neck, right around here. They didn't paint any other part. They just let me wear clothes. And then I had something like an afro. Then they just sprayed spray on it and made it look like the white kinky hair. And so I got the part because it was a singing part where I had to sing Heather on the Hill and so forth.
Interesting.
So yeah, and I was very popular. In my first year, I became a class freshman senator. My second year, they made me class president.
Okay.
And of course, being a Roman Catholic, we used to say the Mass in Latin back then. And of course, the Americans never responded to the priests in the church. So when I became an altar boy, and I started responding in Latin, at the end of the Mass, you know, the priest would come to the end of the church, to the door, and wait for people to come out. The altar boy would be there with him, and more people would be talking to me than the priest. They wanted my autograph because
You were popular.
yeah, I said the Mass. I responded in Latin. So when they asked my autograph, I looked at the father and I said, Father Paul, I said, shall I? He said, yes, go ahead, do a couple. So then, of course, the people started inviting me to their homes because I guess never saw a black person of my caliber. And they were afraid, I think, of the Afro-Americans. But I was harmless because I smiled most of the time, as I do now.
Right.
And of course, my accent made me a little tamer than the Afro-American, who was very mad that he was treated badly because he was black. And of course, we had a problem there. At one time, there was a problem where the white school up on top of the hill was all girls. It was called Lone Mountain.
Okay.
And so they put a little invitation on the board saying all the persons from the University of San Francisco were invited to the dance. So I looked at it, I said, well, I didn't want to go to any dance, but some of my Afro-American friends came. They said, they called me Big G. Instead of Godfrey, they said, Big G, you want to go to the, I said, no, I don't want to go. They said, I'll bet you can't get in. I said, I can get in if I bet, because I'm invited. It says so right on the board.
Right.
He said, no, you won't be able to get in. So he said, let's go. I said, all right, we went. And they said, you go first. And they stood behind me because they knew what was going to happen. I knocked on the door, bam, bam, bam. So one of the young ladies opened the door, and when they opened up, she closed it right back and ran away. Then when the door opened again, a nun was there. The sisters, so the nun came, said, may I help you? I said, yes. I said, I'm Godfrey Pinder, and I'm here for the dance. I saw an invitation on the bulletin board. Then when she saw the two black guys behind me giggling and so forth, she said, just a minute. She closed the door and she went. They must have had a conference of some kind. And then she came back and she said, we don't have any black girls here.
Uh-oh.
And of course, I was always smart on my mouth. I said, we don't like them anyway. So she said, well, you are Mr. Pinder. She said, yes, we heard about you. I said, yeah. She said, you may come in, but your friends cannot. I said, well, if my friends cannot, I will not. So have a good night. And I left with my friends.
That's very, about what year was that?
This was in 59.
Okay. All right.
59.
That's an interesting story.
Because in 57 I left, and then I went to work to Edie Sassoon Company as a bookkeeper. While I was, waiting around to go abroad. And then this Mr. Lees, who was a priest at San Francisco, he came to teach in the Bahamas. But he had left the priesthood.
Okay.
And he had his wife with him. And he's the one who discovered me and asked me to go to the university.
Okay.
And that's how that happened.
So what did you study while you were there?
Well, while I was there, I studied generally. In my first year, I took 18 units, got straight A's without cracking a book,
Wow.
because most of the things I already had in at my college, St. Augustine's, and it was 6 years.
Right.
So the other 2 years was like an associate degree. It was like 2 years of college. And so I didn't study anything in particular until my second year.
Okay.
My second year, I wanted to be many things. First, I wanted to be an accountant because I was good in mathematics. I wanted to be a doctor because I was good in biology. I wanted to be, well, first of all, a great basketball player. And then, of course, I wanted to be an English professor because I was good in English.
But you could have chosen any one.
Well, I could have done any one, but during the summer, I was asked to work with some of the young Afro-American boys and try to be an example for them. And as I began to work, I realized I wanted to be a social worker.
Okay.
So I became a social worker. But we had a problem. There were gangs involved,
Okay.
and I had to deal with the gangs. And the gangs had a fight one time, and I was not there. And one of the boys got killed.
Oh no.
The model one, you know, I was trying to get role models out of the group, as they said. And one boy named Danny McGuire, I remember his name all the way back there, he became a model. It was good. But the gang didn't like that. And they were angry with him. And they had a fight, and they threw him through a glass pane, and it severed all his arteries.
Oh no.
So my assistant called me, said, Mr. Pinder, something happened to Danny McGuire. So I got my 1940 Ford, and I started it up, and I started to run and stop. You know, my Ford used to stop. It got vapor lock. Jump out, wait for half hour. We're going again. It stopped. And anyway, I finally got there. When I got there, I saw Danny McGuire lying on the ground, and so I called the ambulance. The ambulance came immediately. I left him. I didn't touch him. His mother was so nice, but she knew nothing about it. And when the ambulance came, we picked him up. So I tried to help pick him up. And when we picked him up, his right arm dropped off on the ground.
Oh no.
So I picked up his right arm and put it in there, in the ambulance. And of course, the ambulance went away. I got in the back of it and went with him and went to the morgue because he was dead on arrival. And they secured his body in the morgue. Then I came back, and there was a plan now for the trial. And the other young man, we called him Junior, big fellow, we called him Junior. There was a trial, and of course, I went to the trial because I had to say how I found him and how etc. I gave testimony, and the prosecutor, when I was finished, said, "That was perfect." I said, "Thank you very much." He said, "Have you ever tried becoming a lawyer?" I said, "No, I never thought of it." He said, "Well, you should." And then I heralded back to the time when I used to draft property papers for my grandmother, and I went to Sir Lyndon. He was Lyndon Pending at the time, not Sir Lyndon. He said, "Oh, this is perfect. I'll let Marguerite draft it up." Marguerite Pending was a McKinsey. And of course, she was my cousin, because I had 80% of the people in the Bahamas are my cousins, I found out.
Okay.
Yeah, and so that is how that was. But before that, the two gangs got together, and they wanted to fight because of what happened with one or the other. One got killed and one was arrested, so they were mad at each other. Again, my assistant called me, Mr. Pinder, the two gangs are fighting. So I jumped in my vapor lock car again, I got there, and as I got there, I met them squaring off. One was about, they were about 12 feet apart. And as I got there, I walked right between the both of them, the both groups. I was brave back then. And I started talking. I said, "You all can't do this. You're going to kill one another." A man is already dead. Wait until you bury him before you start to fight. And I did that. My eyes were closed. When I looked to the right, nobody was there. When I looked to the left, no one was there. They just disappeared. Apparently, they agreed with me.
Wow, that was a brave move.
That was a brilliant move, and we had another problem at the grave. The Johnny McGuire's brother was a Vietnam veteran of some kind, or he was in the Marines, and he came to the funeral and he was drunk,
Oh, wow.
and also he had a pistol. I didn't know at the time, but I told my assistant, I said, now, keep your eye on him because he's drunk and he might do something. Well, my assistant got preoccupied being shouted at by a young man, and she didn't pay attention. When I looked over there, I saw this man walking. He put his hand in his pocket, and so I just walked over there. And during that time, I could walk without anybody hearing me because of my basketball ability. And I took a couple strides because I was over 6 feet at the time. I think I still am. And as I got there, and as he pulled it like that, and I nudged him like that, and he fell in the grave. When he fell in the grave, the pistol dropped out. I jumped in the grave, took the pistol, and of course, some people helped me with him, and he started crying, and he said, Mr. Pinder, I was going to kill somebody. I said, I know you're going to kill somebody. And they took him away, and his mother, who was so nice, took him home. And of course, the mother came back, and she left him home. And the funeral continued.
Wow, that was something else.
Yeah.
Sound like you could write a book. Have you ever?
Well, I can. I did a lot of other things. I wanted to be an actor.
Yes.
And Sidney Poitier is my step-uncle.
Okay.
And I was supposed to be the next Sidney Poitier. Of course. And I went for a tryout in Los Angeles. That's about 500 miles from San Francisco. I don't know if you know where San Francisco is, on the West Coast. I got in my car and I went down there, and my car stopped on the road, so I took a bus. And I finally got where I was going, and I had a manager. His name was Olden.
Okay.
So he took me in to meet the man. They said they needed a new Sidney Poitier, and they thought that I would be the right man. I looked like him, but I was a handsomer version. At the time, I didn't know he was my step-uncle, because his sister, Maud Poitier Hamilton, and her husband, Reuben Hamilton, had adopted me when I was 14.
Okay.
They came to my mother's house, my grandmother's house through the Valley Corner, because my mother had already died when I was 4 years of age,
Oh, okay.
and asked for me to be adopted. Now, what adoption was, I didn't stay with them. I stayed at the monastery because I was also studying to be a priest.
Oh.
They wanted me to be, they thought I was a model guy and a model boy. They used to call me a God angel back then, because, I was, the only harm I did was play basketball. So, as I went in to try out for this movie, I saw this white man on the couch. He looked like a cross between a snake and a, anyway, he was very thin and he looked sickly, but I was told he was a billionaire and he was a producer. So he said, wow, look at the body on this man. I never lift any weights or anything, but I guess I was sinewy.
Athletic, probably.
Yeah, athletic, yeah. So he said, come over here, my son, and sit by me. So I went over there and I sat by him. And all of a sudden he put his hand on my leg.
Uh-oh.
So I jumped up. And I went to my manager. I said, now I heard about this, and I don't think that this is going to happen. I said, I'm not going to do that. He said, but Godfrey, if you want to be a big star, sometimes you have to do certain things to be a big star. I said, well, let me think about it. Is there a bathroom here? He said, downstairs. That was my cue. I went downstairs, out the door, Hollywood and Vine, and hitchhiked back to San Francisco, 500 miles.
Wow.
As I got a ride back, I met a man who he called everybody horse. He had a peg leg. I think his name was Luther, something to that effect, Luther. He said, horse, where you going? I said, I'm going back to San Francisco. He said, well, I'm going to San Francisco State. He said, but I don't go there until the weekend. If you can stay by us until then. I said, fine. So I went to stay by them. And as I got in there, I met a man who was talking to a group of people. I sat down and listened, and he had on his arm CAP, a black armband. I found out that it was Community Alert Patrol. So I said, oh, I listened. I said, this was in Watts. I said, now a lot of people are very unhappy, and there's going to be a riot. He was telling the people. He said, now there are going to be a lot of kids out there, and what we got to do is go and take the kids off the street. So I'm listening. He said, we have about 12 people here. I said, what about you? He said, would you like to help get the kids off the street? I said, yes, I wouldn't mind. So he gave me an armband, and I put it on my left arm, and I went out, and I was very daring back then. And as I was trying to help the kids off the street, a man put a gun to my head, a sheriff. He said, freeze, nigga.
Uh-oh.
So I threw my hand up very quickly because I saw a lot of cowboy movies when I was a boy. They had a lot of the Hillside Theater. And I kept my hand up. So he said, what are you doing here? I said, well, I'm trying to help get the kids off the street so they don't get into any problems and don't get in your way. He said, show me your ID. I said, it's in my upper left pocket. He said, get it. I said, no, sir, I don't want to make a false move. That's what all the cowboys used to say, when they don't make a false move when they pull a gun on you. So I said, I don't want to make a false move. So he looked at me, and I had my smile, and I was smiling, and he looked in my eyes. He saw me smiling, and I saw him uncock the gun from my head, and he put it down, and he said, you are the luckiest nigger in the world.
Oh, my father.
And I said, thank you, sir. I smiled, and everything was finished after then. And of course, they did have the Watts riot, and they tried to bring everybody in to calm them. They bring in Harry Belafonte, James Brown, Muhammad Ali, all the stars, just to calm the kids down. Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, and the kids were pushing up against the stairs, and it was pushing the stairs so close together it could have hit the stars. So James Brown was in his bus. He said, y'all tell them to get away from that stage, otherwise I'm going on that stage because I'm going to get hurt. So they kept pushing it. He said, tell them to get away or I'm going to drive my bus away. They didn't get away, they kept pushing, so James Brown drove away.
Wow, that's very interesting to have been right there when all of that happening.
Yeah, but the most interesting part is when I was coming over. I had a plane ride over to Florida, and then we didn't have much money, so I had to take a bus.
Okay.
And 99, there was a Greyhound bus, but you have $99 for 99 days. You travel for 99 days for $99, and as long as you keep going up, you wouldn't have to pay any extra money.
Okay.
So we got through Texas, and they stopped for a break. So I got off the bus, and I went over to get some water. I was probably the only one to go off the bus. And as I got over there, I saw the spigots, one said black, and one said white. So I went over to the white one, and I started to drink water. So I heard someone in the back of me said, hey, boy. So I didn't think he was talking to me, because I wasn't a boy at the time. Anyway, he said, hey, boy, I'm talking to you. So I look around. My smile was there again. I said, yes, sir. He said, you're not from around here, are you? I said, no, sir. He said, where are you from? He said, I said, I'm from the Bahamas. He said, oh. He said, well, you know you're not supposed to be drinking from that fountain. I said, why, sir? He said, well, that's a white fountain. You're supposed to drink from the black fountain. I said, well, sir, where I came from, they don't have any black water. They only have white water. He said, you better get on that bus. I said, thank you, sir. I better go on the bus.
Wow. Yeah, you saw it all that way.
That's all. I got to San Francisco and I did a lot of other things. I worked with the Recreation Center for the handicap, taking the handicap around San Francisco in the parks, within a 100-mile radius. And I used to carry them back and forth. And what I had to do was to raise publicity for the handicap center. It was a recreation center for the handicap right away from Fly Shaka Zoo. And they had water there, but dirty water, not like the Bahamas. So I would never go there. But one day morning, as I was watching the water and I was comparing it with my water, there was a young lady who was Miss California.
Okay.
And she was dressed in an outfit and she somehow went in the water. And all of a sudden I heard a scream. And as she screamed, and I looked, she had on a blue dress and it started to turn like almost dark. And what had happened was a shark had come and bit her leg off from her thigh and ran with her leg. And they grabbed her leg and somebody started beating the shark with something, and the shark spit out the leg, and they were able to grab the leg and rush off, I suppose, to the hospital. But that was quite horrific.
Wow.
But I used to drive the bus and take my handicapped people, and they were all rich people. You know, the rich people would take their handicapped kids with muscular dystrophy and all the other things, and epilepsy and what have you, and put them there because they didn't want to, bother with them or whatever. But in any event, I used to drive them around.
Right.
And I had a couple of incidents. One incident was we were on a roller coaster. You know what a roller coaster is? They would give us free rides, and we get publicity, and they would send donations into the recreation center. So we were on a roller coaster one time, and I had put in charge an Afro-American man to be with a young lady who had epilepsy. Epilepsy is when you faint and your tongue come out your mouth, and we had that spoon with the rubber on it. If it came out your mouth, you stick the spoon in the mouth so you don't swallow your tongue or don't bite it. In any event, he decided he was going to leave the girl and go and talk with another girl who was one of the volunteers and was kind of pretty. So this roller coaster thing started, and he wasn't with her. He left her there. And I was way in the back, the roller coaster, having a big ride, and all of a sudden, they put this, the thing over you so you don't slide down. But all of a sudden, she started sliding down.
Oh boy.
And her neck was almost caught up. So I saw it, and even though the roller coaster was moving and doing the swinging, I crawled from there right to where she was. I was able to take the thing off her neck. And then I just hugged her up and so forth, and then tore them out open. Everybody had their spoon with them. I put my spoon in her mouth and I just hugged her up until it stopped.
Right.
And of course I fired the young man immediately and made him walk home. He had to walk 200 miles. But I suppose he hitchhiked.
He probably did.
He hitchhiked. And then I fired him. And then he became a policeman. And about a year later, I heard, I was driving my car, oh, right in front of me, he stopped, and I had to stop suddenly. And I saw this police officer coming up to me, and he had on his glasses, had on his hat. I didn't recognize him. He said, "Do you recognize me?" I said, "Not offhand." He said, "I'm the guy you made walk." I said, "Oh." I said, "You're a policeman now." I said, "Yeah, but I see you have a motorcycle, so you don't have to walk anymore." He said, "I only came to tell you that I thank you for what you did for me. What you did made me become more disciplined, and more concerned, and I was able to become a police. So I just thought I'd come and thank you. And I said, everything's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, in life, everything happens for a reason. Sometimes we go through difficult times, but it's only to make us better.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. But I had all kind of incidents when I was...
Imagine. You definitely could write a book.
No, I got involved in it. And, of course, I was a good dancer. And I used to be with an African dance group. And I used to dance the Agbada, they called it. And Olatunji was was there at one time. He used to beat the drum and say, oh, la, 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 la. Oh, la, 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 la. That boogity, 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 boom. Boogity, 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 boom. And, of course, I learned to play the conga drums.
Okay.
And during my time off, I would sing in the nightclubs. And
King Erickson was up in the States around that time, too, right?
Yeah, who?
King Erickson, was it?
Harrison.
Yeah.
Harrison told me he was there. I didn't see him, but he was there. But I know there was one Congo drummer called Big Black from the Bahamas who was there. But I saw Harrison later on.
Right, okay.
But I didn't see him while I was there because I was playing the drums, I was singing. I met bluesmen, Sonny Terry, Brownie McGee. I met all the jazz artists, Charlie Parker and all the rest. And West Montgomery, I played Congo drums in one of his shoots. He was doing a recording, and he asked me to play Congo drum for him in the back. And his first album, I'm the fellow in the yellow, in the yellow shirt,
Okay.
and I'm the one who played the drums.
Interesting. So where and when did you study law?
Oh, well, as I said, when the boy got killed, the prosecutor told me that he thought I would study law, and I was in school at the time, and I went and finished it up, got my BA degree in social work, and I applied to 6 law schools. I applied to Harvard, Yale, University of California, Berkeley, University of California, Los Angeles, about 6. And I was accepted at University of California, Los Angeles. And as I got there, a young man by the name of Johnny Cochran was there. You might have heard the name Johnny Cochran, a great lawyer. And we became friends, and I was there 1 month.
He's dead now.
Yeah, he died. But I was there 1 month, and then I went home to my apartment, and I looked in the mailbox, and I saw a postcard. And the postcard said, Berkeley, California. That's where I always wanted to go to law school, because that was the #1 law school at the time. I was accepted at all the other law schools, but I wanted a school where I could get a scholarship as well. I had a scholarship at Los Angeles Law School, and when I looked, it said, we have 1 more seat.
Wow.
If you get here within a week, you have the seat. And so I was, a little ways away, and I drove, and my car was vaporlocked again. I stopped, put water in it, and when I reached, I drove on the sidewalk and ran into the university. It was on Shattuck Avenue. International House was on the top. There are a variety of international people, some from Trinidad, Africa, Europe, and different parts. I dashed in, and I made haste slowly when I got there, and I saw a lady. I said, my name is Godfrey Pinder, and I showed her the guy. Oh, she said, you, Mr. Pinder. I said, just a minute. And she went in the room, and she came back. She said, the dean will see you now. And so I went into the room where the dean was, and he said, oh, you're Godfrey Pinder. You have quite a resume. And, I put on it all the, where I worked, recreation and handicap, where the boy was killed, the teen posts and all that. He said, you have quite a resume. And he said, you have a place to stay? I said, no. So we'll put you in Melville Hall. They had rooming upstairs for the students. And I would room with a white young man. And of course, I went through with honors and double honors.
Excellent. Wow.
And then after that, I tried to come back to the Bahamas. And I sent a letter to Sir Lyndon's law firm. But at that time I think he was Prime Minister, and Kendall Norwich was in charge of the firm.
Okay.
So I wrote him a letter saying I wanted to be a part of it. He wrote me back. He wrote me a very, very nasty letter. He said, boy, you cannot be a lawyer in the Bahamas because you're an American lawyer. And we don't want American lawyers over here. And he signed it, and I said, oh, okay. He gave me a hint. So I went to the dean. The dean said, oh, no. You have to go to England and study law. He said, we have a person who studied law in England right here.
Yeah.
I said, okay, wonderful. I go on to see the man. He said, oh, yeah, the dean told me you were coming. He said, you have to go to England. I said, well, where do I go? To one of the Inns of Court. I said, the Inns of Court? He said, yes. He said, there are 4 of them. He said, there's Lincoln's Inn, Gray's Inn, Middle Temple, Inner Temple. I said, well, which one should I go to? He said, the one with the best dinner. I said, the best dinner? He said, yes, you have to eat your dinners. So I said, which one has the best dinner? He said, the one I went to, of course, Lincoln's Inn. I said, I'll give you a letter of recommendation. I said, fine. So he gave me a letter of recommendation. And in the Bahamas, when they give a letter of recommendation, the letter's closed, you can't see what's in it. When I went to him, he gave me a letter of recommendation. I started to leave. He said, aren't you going to read it? I said, oh, yes, I'm reading it. Because, I introduced the Bahamas. That was the most glowing letter. I was in this class, and of course I got double honors. And that was the most glowing letter I ever saw. And I thanked him very much. And I went off to San Francisco. No, not to San Francisco. I went off to England. And before I could get to England, I was told that you need money to get here. I said, money? I thought they accept. No. I went back to the university. I went back into the gentleman who recommended me, the professor. I said, I need money. He said, oh, I thought you'd never come back. So he said, I have some people who would put some money together for you. And he got together some international people, and they gave me $25,000 in a check. And I went off on a plane and went there. And when I got to England, I was a part of Lincoln's Inn. And then they had the debates. So, the Englishmen were debating everybody. And I won the first debate. I used my English accent because I'm an actor. Do you know really what we're doing here? that type of thing, And jolly good. And all that. And I won the first debate.
Yes.
And then I went back and I won the second debate. So the third time, I was called in by the master of the inn, named Master Ian Warren. He said, because I'd already got my doctorate from the University of California, Berkeley, a JD, which is a Doctor of Law.
Right.
He said, Dr. Pinder. I said, yes, Master. He said, you don't have to prove that again, do you? I said, what, Master? I played like I didn't know what was going on. He said, the debates. I said, oh. He said, you won 2 in a row. I said, yes, I have. He said, now you want to win a third? Should you let another student who is worthy win? And the person who was worthy was an English person who was always coming second. But an English woman, they wanted an English person to win. Because I found out once you won that, you would get some of the top jobs in the law firm.
Okay.
Okay? So I said, I'll think about it, Master. So I went to the debates, and I got up when it was my time, and I debated why I should not debate, and I said what the master said, I will not debate, I will decline and allow some other worthy student to win. And I sat down, and the place went wild.
You won again.
They went wild, and then there was the Eric Crowder Shield. So Eric Crowder was the judge. So he said, Dr. Pinder, when the clapping and the shouting quieted down. I said, yes, Judge. He said, come up higher. I went to him. He said, because you've been so humble in your concern for others, of your fellow men, we'll make you an honorary judge. So I was made an honorary judge, and I know how to do it in the debate because I knew who they wanted to win, and I just voted for her, and she won. Of course, she was thankful. Oh, thank you, Godfrey. I said, you're welcome. But I go back to my behavior after but I could affect any accent, English, Afro-American.
That was the actor in you.
Yeah, Hispanic, I could hear an accent and affect it. So that is what happened there, the debate. And of course, I decided to take the final exams, but they have two exams. One exam is for people from the Caribbean and Africa, from the Commonwealth. It's an easier exam. Then there's an exam for the English people. But anybody can take it, so I chose to take the exam for the English people.
Okay.
And I passed that with flying colors, and as a result, I was called to the bar of England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. So I can practice anywhere in the Commonwealth. And when they went to the European Union, I was seconded in there, so I could practice in the European Union as well. So I could practice anywhere in the world. But now the person who took the ordinary exam, like Algernon Allen and Anita Allen and Battle and all them, they can only practice back in the Bahamas.
Okay. So after you, so you could have practiced in the Bahamas too then?
Oh yes, oh yeah, anywhere in the world.
Right, okay.
Anywhere in the world. I think that would include the Bahamas.
Yes. It certainly would. Yeah. So much for that letter saying they don't want American lawyers, because after that you were qualified to work anyway.
Oh, but he helped me. And I was grateful to him. I didn't tell him, but while I was there, and I enrolled in the London School of Economics, and wrote a piece on the Bahamas Constitution. It was in 1972 that, the Bahamas was gaining its independence. July 9th, 1973 would be the time when they would get independence. So I enrolled and I wrote a thesis, a 300-page thesis on the Bahamas Constitution, which received distinction, and I distributed everything to, of course, Linden. Everything I wrote, I would send.
Right.
And of course, I wrote something on the National Insurance Board. And of course, it came out of New Zealand. And the National Insurance Board came from my thesis on the national labor. And what I wanted was the government to support the breadwinner's family when the breadwinner died. And they'd give him the mother and the children,
Right.
medical and money for, as if they were working, etc. And it would be free and supported by the government.
Right.
But what they did was they charged the people, the individuals, they had to pay the money. They weren't supposed to. The individuals now pay the money. You got to pay national insurance. You shouldn't have to. My program didn't say that. And as such, they didn't do any medical. They just trying now to do the medical. And guess who was in charge of a national insurance board? Kendall Nordich. The money you see, used to have the money in the clothes closet. All the cash money used to be hanging around. And so what happens now, I didn't make too much of a fuss about it, but what happens now is that the people who work at National Insurance Board can get medical care. The MPs can get medical care, but the average citizen can hardly get it. But I had a client who the police beat one time, and nobody beat my client, because they scared me when they do that. And of course, when I came back, and I was a lawyer, and I shot up to the top and became a household name. And of course, I didn't, but when they beat him, they had to take him away and give him the medical report. He was there for 2 years hanging on for dear life. He finally died. So I sued him for negligence. And of course, loss of life. And of course, they got some money.
Okay.
But, that was a sad state of affairs. What happened there. And right now, first of all, the I think they brought out this VAT. But what I recommended was a 15% across the board for rich people at a certain amount. You know, like they did in that part of China that's not the main part, and they didn't accept that. So when I came back from home from abroad, Celinda wanted to see me and talk with me. He said, "Oh, we got all your writings and this and that, and boy, you can write now, and this and that. I can make you Attorney General, and boy, you can be anything." He even came to my call to the bar. He sent Perry Christie. I didn't know Perry Christie to present my call to the bar, and so forth. He said, "Man, we're going to make you a big thing. Come sit down and talk with me." I sat down and talked with him, and we talked and said, "You know, my kids don't want to be prime minister. Maybe you can be prime minister someday." I said, "Yeah, maybe." And so forth. But it turned out I didn't like politics.
So you never
It's a
entered
dirty.
politics?
I ran in Bamboo Town. I ran in Abaco. I was winning there, and then, but I was with the opposition. I wasn't with Celinda's party. I decided not to go with him because I went with Sir Wallace Whitfield, who was my cousin. My name is Godfrey Wallace Pinder, and he was named Wallace Whitfield. You know, Cecil Wallace Whitfield. So I met with him, and I was running in Abaco, and they were splitting the party. They had F&M, BDP, and I was the most popular candidate. So they wanted me to come to New Providence, where there was about 20 seats or more, so I could influence that. But when they split, they had the BDP and the F&M.
Okay.
And the BDP won some seats, and all the people saved their deposits. And of course, the F&M lost and the PLP won. But here's what happened to me. I had come from Abaco to campaign here. But of course, I had represented the poop deck. And there was a strike. And then, of course, there was negotiations. And now the campaign was going on. So I told them, the arbitrator, "May I have an adjournment so that I can go and campaign in Bamboo Town?" Now the word had got out, don't let him go and campaign, because if he goes, he's going to win 80% of the people in his family, and plus he's a good talker. And so I said, "No, I have to go." "You are not going. If you leave," the arbitrator said, "I'll fine your client $5,000 a day." So I had to hang in there, and then Huey Bodie was in Freeport. Somebody say, "Pro, get in touch with Huey Bodie, and then we will, he'll help you get out." As it stood, he came, and somehow he helped me get out. I got in there a little late, but I was able to save my deposit. But once somebody came to me in my office and said, "Dr. Pinder, where's Dr. Pinder?" I said, "I'm Dr. Pinder." Say, "No, you're not Dr. Pinder." I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "No, Dr. Pinder's a white man." I said, "White man?" I said, "Yes, we were told you were white." I said, "Why?" They say, "Because a black man could not accomplish all the academic to accomplish," and they say, "It's a white Pinder." And then they said, I couldn't talk too good. I was like a professor, a dumb professor in the lab. They put all that out there before I got there, knowing that I wouldn't get to see all the people.
Politics, right. Very interesting.
So one final thing is that, you heard me call myself Pro. You might want to know why I was called Pro.
I was going to ask you that, because I know that that's what people always say when they mention you. They say,
but
Pro Pinder.
A lot of people don't know him by another thing but Pro.
Yes.
When I was in St. Augustine's, I was first in my class, and I was with Miss Lockhart's stepfather, James Nixon. I was first in my class, so they called me Professor. And then I started singing and dancing, and they said, "This boy is a professional," and debating and winning that debates and playing basketball. They said, "This boy is a professor, he does everything well." So instead of calling me Professor on one occasion and Professional on the other, they just say Pro. But the people who know me say it 3 times. They say Pro, Pro, Pro.
So that was from high school days.
Yeah, I was from college. St. Augustine's was a college because it was 6 years rather than 4. And then I played basketball in the Priory, and I had more hang time than Michael Jordan. And of course, Magic Johnson, my no-look pass was and behind my back, and I could hide the ball on me and nobody would know where it is. And of course, dribble and so forth and so on.
Right.
Like Marcus Haynes to the Globetrotters. So that's how I got the name Pro.
I imagine you had a family and children. At some point, you seem to be so focused. I mean, what accounts for your focus in all the things that you accomplished?
Well, first of all, I had my mother. And my mother focused me at an early age.
Yes.
I didn't really know, but I'll tell you how focused I was. My big brother, Johnny, we call him, his name was Jonathan. There was a Christmas play, and he had to say a poem. But while my mother was teaching it to him, she had me in her arms, and I was about 2 years younger than him. And of course, I was learning the poem along with him. Little did he know I was learning it. And of course, time came now for him to say it. And I don't know if you know our ladies, but they have a stage and they have a curtain. When you raise it, it makes noise. So when it made noise, my brother was out front already, and me and my mother were in the back watching him. And when it raised noise, he got stiff and he couldn't talk. So my mother said, something wrong with Johnny. She said, Godfrey, go out there and help him. So I went out there and held his hand. I held his hand, and I recited the poem. And everybody threw up their hat and threw money on the stage and everything. And Johnny was crying because he failed, and I just hugged him up and brought him back. But the focus came from that. And I always wanted to be a priest at some point. And I noticed all my friends were getting young ladies pregnant, and they couldn't go abroad. I never did that. I never had a girlfriend as such. There were a lot of young ladies who liked me a lot when I played basketball. And one evening, they decided to ambush me. And I was going across the government ground. You know what the government ground is? Come from St. Francis and come down Meaden Street. And about 5 young ladies jumped on me and started tearing off my clothes.
What?
You know? I guess they were just playing around. And I said, no. And they said, we ain't going to get you now. I said, oh, okay, rape me then, rape me. And of course, they all run away and say, no, we're not. I thought I'd play psychology, put some psychology on them, and say, all right. And they all ran away.
I guess they couldn't figure out why you were so focused and not into women or girls.
No, I wasn't. I was focused on my studies. I was focused on my back. Everything I did, I was focused, and I always won. I never lost.
Right.
Just as I did it by law. I always won because I studied hard, and I paid attention to the my client, and I always believed in this. What the lawyer said to Christ one time when he asked him, what is the greatest commandment? Matthew 22nd chapter, I think it is. And Christ, he didn't go to any high school. He had on all the dirty clothes because, there had a lot of dust back then. And he snapped, the greatest commandment is that you love the Lord thy God with thy whole heart, thy whole soul, thy whole strength. And the second, which is equally as great, is that you love your neighbor as yourself.
Yes.
And when I saw that, I said no. So I love my neighbor, and if people had no money, I would represent them anyway. As a matter of fact, when I went in court and I saw all the little boys here, I would represent all of them. And get them off right there, because vagrancy, how can you charge someone in the Bahamas with vagrancy? Loitering? Well, what about all the tourists in the Bahamas that go looking at the windows? They loiter. And of course, I had already written on the Constitution, so I know freedom of movement was important. freedom of expression was a constitutional right, and so forth and so on. So the judge would just let them all go right there. Well, I came home here and I saw our young men are in disarray, and oh, it's terrible. And even now I want to form a club for these young men because they're shooting up each other and they're not working, they're on the wall, and it's our Bahamian men. The others who come from abroad, from Haiti and different parts, they're focused because where they came from, they had nothing. And when they see an opportunity, they take advantage of it. But I always say, and my stepfather, Reuben Hamilton, who was married to Maud Poitier Hamilton, Sidney Poitier's sister, he said to me, he said, Godfrey, he said, if you put God first, everything else will fall into place. And I've always done that as a boy. Yeah. My mother taught me that. My grandmother, I would get up 5 o'clock every morning to go to church. I would get up 5 o'clock to go to school, to be at a bus. That school, St. Augustine, was 8 in the morning till 8 at night. They taught discipline. And that's where I got my discipline and my focus from. So I would say, we need some big brothers for these people, but put God first. When you put God first, everything else will fall into place. And what I was taught, my grandmother, before I left to go abroad, she said, now Godfrey, mind your manners. Manners and behavior carry you through the world.